Today's session. Today's training will be on CAPA. A little bit about today's session. This webinar is being recorded. Please send us any questions that you have throughout today's session using the Q&A panel in the Teams Live event window. You can find the button for the Q&A panel in the top right-hand side of the Teams window. Questions that you send us will be addressed at the end of today's webinar, but please send us your questions as soon as you think of them, and we'll make sure to get to them at the end of the session. If for some reason we don't get to your question today, or you think of a question on CAPA after the session today, please feel free to reach out to us via email and we'll answer all of your questions on CAPA. Please be sure to complete the quiz and survey at the end of today's session. That's our way of tracking attendance in this training and is also our best way of getting feedback from you on this training and our overall training program. So please be sure to complete that at the end of the session today. The training materials that you're seeing today, as well as the recording of the session, will be provided after all sessions are completed. This is the third of 3 sessions, so please look out for an email after today's session with the presentation, and the recording will also be posted on our Supplier Information Center, and we'll send out a communication when that's ready as well. Our moderator for today's training is Lindsay Sparrow. Lindsay's a global raw material supplier coordinator with the Mondelez Global Supplier Quality Team, and she's based out of Bourneville in the United Kingdom. As you think of questions, please send them to Lindsay. She'll make sure they all are kept organized, and we'll get to those questions at the end of the session today. Myself, my name is Chris Dancona, and I'll be your presenter today. I'm also part of the Mondelez Global Supplier Quality Team. I'm based out of East Hanover in the United States. I have a degree in Industrial and Systems Engineering from Binghamton University in New York, and I've been working in the food industry for 17 years. In my career, I've held roles in engineering, process improvement, operations, and quality, and I've been training and coaching others in problem solving for about 12 of those years. Problem solving, CAPA, and root cause analysis are things that I'm very passionate about, and I'm very excited to share that with you today. So for today's agenda, we'll be going through 3 things. First, the CAPA process steps. So we're looking at the overall steps that every good process should have. Talk about the Mondelez expectations with regards to CAPA. And throughout today's session, we'll be going through some exercises where we rate different CAPA plans. To join today's exercises, you can go to menti.com and use that 8-digit code that you see there on the screen, 94100600. You could also use the link that we're putting in the Q&A panel. Lindsay will be putting that up shortly. Or you could scan the QR code that's there on the screen with your mobile device to join the Menti exercises. Please keep this window open throughout today's training because we'll come back to Mentimeter a few times throughout the session today. And we actually have one exercise up there ready to go. So once you get in there, please start answering that first question. And the question is, how much experience do you have with CAPA? Not we're sure why it's looking so small on the screen here, but
okay.
you can go to menti.com and use that 4-digit code there. You can answer CAPAs new to me. I have participated in some CAPAs. I have led CAPAs, or I've managed a CAPA program. Give everybody a few seconds to answer. Right. We have a pretty good mix here. Lots of new. Lots of people have participated in CAPAs, but maybe have not led one. Not many people have led them on their own. but it looks like the people that have led them on their own, most of them have managed a CAPA program. So most people here really just participated in some CAPAs. Great. We'll keep those Mentimeter windows open and we'll come back to this exercise later on in the session. Thank you for sharing. 3 takeaways for today's training. First, to understand the steps to an effective CAPA process. Number 2 is to learn best practices for executing CAPA. And number 3 is to recognize the differences between a good and a poor CAPA plan. Before we jump into it, let's really talk about what is CAPA. And CAPA is a systematic process to investigate the root causes of identified problems or risks and to take actions to prevent the recurrence. So it's really about fixing those issues for good. These are the process steps that every good CAPA process should have. In reality, sometimes these steps may happen in a little bit of a different order, but you need to really consider these in your CAPA program to have an effective CAPA program. First is to identify the issues, then prioritize. Then we analyze root cause, determine the corrective actions based on the root cause, implement those actions, verify effectiveness of the actions. And then we also want to have tracking of our CAPA process and the individual CAPAs, analyze our data sources that are inputs to the CAPA process, as well as have a management review of your overall CAPA process and health. The first step is to identify issues. Effective CAPA programs really make sure to define and document what sorts of opportunities and problems that program will manage and how they'll be managed. So as you're setting up your program or evaluating your program, you want to ask yourself, when is CAPA required? How are you going to manage CAPAs for each of your QMS programs? Because it may differ depending on what triggered the CAPA. And what are the triggers for CAPA? When do you need to take CAPA for any type of particular issue? And what level of investigation is needed based on the type or severity of the issue that you're seeing? When you have a problem, you really want to make sure that you're defining the nature of the problem before you go into the next step of problem solving. So as we identify issues, we want to have a good problem statement to work against. And a great way to do this is to use a tool called 5W1H. And we want to ask questions to gather facts. What, where, when, who, which, how. What is the issue? Where is it happening? When is it happening? Who is involved when the problem occurs? Which tendency or pattern do we see when the issue occurs? And how does it differ from what we expected to happen? Or how much, how many? To look at an example that we're going to follow throughout today's training to create the focus based on the facts from the 5W1H. We're going to look at an example that's more of a manufacturing example, but this one's very easy to follow through the whole process, which is why we use it. What is the issue? There was no sugar delivered. Where in the process did it occur? From bin 5 to mixer 7. When did it occur? On 6/5 at 10 a.m. Who is involved or affected? Well, Dave, the operator. Which pattern do we see? Well, it happened on mixer 7. And how much, how many? It caused 120 minutes of downtime. And what we can do is take all these facts and combine them together into a concise problem statement that we could use to very easily explain the problem to anybody that's going to be participating in the CAPA. On 6/5 at 10 a.m., mixer 7, operated by Dave, had 120 minutes of downtime when there was no sugar delivered from bin 5 to the mixer. You can see here that we only listed facts. We didn't make any assumptions about why the issue was occurring. We really just want to gather facts at this stage. One thing that could be helpful is to not only say what is, but what is not. For instance, for which we said it's mixer 7. We could also say it's not happening on mixer 8. That may be important as you dig into the problem. We also don't say because of or due to at this stage. We're not making any assumptions on why the problem is happening. We're just stating the facts. So because or due to should not show up in the problem statement. The sequence here isn't really important. There's a number of ways you can combine the 5W and 1H together to make a problem statement here. You can probably see that. What matters is that you're getting all the facts down on paper and combining them in the problem statement in a way that makes sense to you. Once we've identified our issues, the next step is to prioritize. We want to prioritize the execution of our CAPAs based on risk. So we want to do a risk assessment at this stage. When the problem occurs, we want to understand, is it a one-time issue or is it a repeating issue? Is it isolated or widespread throughout the process? What is the severity of the issue? Could it cause harm? Could it injure somebody? What is the impact to regulatory compliance and customer requirements? Once we understand the level of risk here, we want to take a proportional response, right? If it's high risk, we want to prioritize doing that CAPA first and doing it urgently. We also at this stage want to determine what immediate corrections that can be done now, what those corrections are, to try to control the symptoms of the issue, really to mitigate and control those risks before proceeding with the root cause analysis and planning permanent corrective actions. We want to control the issue now rather than later. So we really want to ask ourselves at this stage, what can we do now to control the issue? Once we've prioritized, the next step is root cause analysis. Why is root cause analysis needed? Well, are you constantly relying on quick fixes, requiring staff to repeat the same tasks over and over again? Are you jumping to solutions when an issue occurs? Or if you have really great investigations, despite that, you're still having the same repeat issues. When people spend a lot of time putting out fires in the workplace, there's this illusion of productivity. And that's because really you're just really busy dealing with symptoms of the issues. And you can think of a problem as a tree, whereas we see the trunk and the leaves of the tree above the ground. Those are the symptoms. What we want to understand and address are the root causes of the symptoms, those roots under the ground, because those are really causing the problem. And if we can address those, we'll fix the problem. Another example here is if you go to the doctor with a cough. The doctor isn't just going to send you home with cough medicine. They're going to understand why you have a cough and try to make sure that they're treating it in the right way to make it go away for good. By addressing the known root causes of a problem, we could really solve those problems for good. We're going to talk about 2 RCA tools today, and these tools you can consider for use as part of your CAPA program. These, by all means, are not the only tools that you could use for root cause analysis, but these are 2 of the easier ones to use and work really well together. But by all means, if you have other root cause analysis tools that you're more comfortable with or your company promotes, that's fine, as long as you're using a method that's really systematic in getting to the root cause of an issue. Fishbone diagram is used for brainstorming sessions on root cause and helps to prepare possible causes and organize them into categories. And in manufacturing, typically use what's called the 4 M's, which we'll see in a second. 5 why analysis is a bit like being an inquisitive 4-year-old who keeps asking why. And this enables us to go from the obvious causes to the underlying causes of an issue and address those. Let's take a look at our sugar example again with the fishbone diagram. What we've done here is in the head of the fish, we've put the problem statement that we developed earlier. On 6/5 at 10 a.m., we had 120 minutes of downtime because there was no sugar delivered. This is the problem that we're trying to solve. And what we do is draw a line towards the problem statement. This is considered the backbone of the fish. And we add the different categories that we want to brainstorm the possible causes in. The 4 categories we're using here are man, machine, material, and method. And with our team, we're going to brainstorm all of the reasons we could think that this sugar issue is happening. So for man, maybe there was no sugar delivered, or maybe the system is put into manual. For the machine-related causes, maybe there's a broken valve or a broken high-level probe, or maybe the blower failed. For material-related causes, maybe the sugar is clumpy, or maybe it got wet somehow. And method, maybe there was no task set up in the delivery system, or maybe there's a dirty level probe. And what we can do at this stage is to now use facts and go look at the issue and verify which of these possible causes are true. If they're not true, we're going to cross them out. For instance, if we go out to the blower and we see that it's operating normally, we can cross out blower failure because we know that that's not happening. Right? We're not going to follow that path any further. The sugar, if we look at it, if it's not clumpy, cross it out. When we looked at the issue, we went and saw that the level probe in the bin was dirty. We could circle that. We verified that with fact, and we're going to follow that path further. The next tool we're going to look at is 5-why analysis. Going back to our symptom, why was there no sugar delivered? And from our fishbone, we can actually take the possible cause that we circled and start asking why against it, because the level probe and the sugar bin was dirty. And what we're going to do now is ask why again to try to get to that underlying root cause. Why was the level probe dirty? Maybe because it had sugar debris built up on it. And what we can do again is verify using facts whether or not this is true. And we see that this is true. There is debris built up on it. So we can ask why again. Why was there sugar debris built up on it? Because it had not been cleaned.
Mhm.
Or maybe because somebody spilt debris on it. And again, we can verify with fact whether or not these happened. Well, we see that it's true. It had not been cleaned. But we found out, nobody's been in that area for a week, so nobody's spilt anything on it. We can cross that out. We're not going to follow that path any further.
Anh ấy đang đứng ở chỗ bên hông này.
Why it had not been cleaned? Because no one was scheduled to clean it, or maybe because the operators don't know how to clean it. And in this case, we know that nobody was scheduled to clean it, so that's true. And we also know that the operators don't know how to clean it. That's something we can take action against. So we're going to circle that. That's our first root cause. Why was no one scheduled to clean it? Because it was not on the cleaning schedule. That's true. Why was it not on the schedule? Because the area was not identified when the original cleaning schedule was created. And that's true. And we're going to circle that. And those are our 2 confirmed root causes that we confirmed using fact. Some good practices when we analyze root cause. The fishbone and 5-why are much more powerful when used together, and I really encourage you to use them together if you can use these tools. And we can ask why for any of the circled causes on the fishbone. Fishbone on its own is not great at getting to the root cause because it doesn't really get to that level of granularity, level of depth that you need to analyze the underlying issues. What it's great at is making sure that you're not overlooking a particular category or type of issue. So those 4 M's are really useful in thinking out of the box when you're brainstorming. On 5-whys, there could be multiple causes for a single why, and we saw that in our example. That's okay. 5-why should branch out like a tree. We always want to check for logical correctness by tracing 5-whys backwards from the last why to see that it makes sense. So going back to the example, if you read it backwards, because the area is not identified when the cleaning schedule was created, it was not on the schedule. And because it was not on the schedule, no one was scheduled to clean it. And because no one was scheduled to clean it, it was not cleaned. That logic makes sense when you read it backwards. If it doesn't make sense when you do that, that probably means you skipped the step in your logic and you made an assumption or you jumped to a conclusion, and there may be some more steps in between that you could add to the 5 whys to make sure that you're considering all the possibilities. Some mistakes to avoid: really working against a poorly defined problem, so not using the 5W1H. That can lead to different people on the team working on different problems, and you may not get to that root cause. We also don't want to jump to conclusions at this stage, so we want to use the tools and don't assume that we know what the issue is. We also don't want to blame people. It wasn't Dave's fault that the sugar wasn't delivered to the mixer. There was something about the process that failed. So blame the process, don't blame the person. Something about our process allowed the issue to occur. Not confirming the possible causes. We want to make sure that we're verifying at each stage using fact, because we don't want to try to take action against something that really isn't happening. Failing to involve the right people. This is especially important at this stage as we analyze root cause, as well as the next stage where we're going to determine corrective actions. We want to have a cross-functional team involved, made up of people with different backgrounds and different experiences, because that's going to ensure that we're thinking of all the possibilities. A team of maintenance personnel, for example, may be really good at thinking of the machine-related possible causes, but may totally overlook material possible causes. So having a good cross-functional team really helps with this process to make sure that you're not going down just a single path. Root causes that just restate the problem or the finding really aren't root causes. We're just trying to fix the symptom if we list that as the root cause. And identifying a solution as a potential root cause is another mistake to avoid. And when I say this, I mean, rather than saying that there was no procedure, identify what the knowledge gap is. Or instead of saying no training, identify the skill deficiency. By doing it this way, it leaves open more options for corrective actions, because maybe there's a possibility, if there's a skill deficiency, to totally eliminate the task or take a different type of corrective action rather than need to do training. So identify the gap rather than the solution as you do your root cause analysis. Once we've gotten down to root cause, the next step is to determine different corrective actions. We want to make sure that we take at least one countermeasure for every root cause that we identified. And the best way to do this is to brainstorm ideas with that same team that led the root cause analysis. Every good action plan must have these elements. So the action itself, what's going to be done to eradicate the root cause, the owner who's going to do it, the date when it's due by, and then tracking of the status, planned, completed, delayed. And an easy way to remember this is who's going to do what by when. For our sugar example, this is a very simple action plan. For the root cause, because operators did not know how to clean the level probes, the action they're taking here is to develop a cleaning procedure and train the operators on how to do it. And Dave's going to do that by May 27th, and it's done. Because this area was not identified when the original cleaning schedule was created, 2 actions are being done here. First is to add level probes to the master cleaning schedule. Carla's going to do that. And include a review of the cleaning schedule and procedures as part of the hygienic design process. Jose is going to do that, and it's in progress. And really that one is going to ensure that we don't have a similar issue happen again, where we modify a process or add new equipment and forget about adding that to the cleaning schedule. So that's really going to prevent that issue from the same type of issue from occurring. When we're developing a CAPA plan, we want to consider the following types of actions. Every good CAPA plan really should have at least 3 of these, and not all 4 of these. Immediate corrections are temporary containment actions. that are taken upon detection of the issue, and really these are to control the symptoms of the problem. So we said and prioritize before we even jump into root cause analysis. We want to take an immediate correction then. At this stage, once we've gotten a root cause, we want to ask the question again, are there additional measures that we need to take at this stage now that we understand the root cause to control the issue? Or based on our understanding now, has the priority of the issue changed?
Nó đang nói về các
For
cái nguyên nhân đấy
corrective
còn gì.
actions, these are
Đưa
the
ra giải
ones
pháp
that
để
are
giải quyết
going
còn
to
gì.
address the root cause of the problem. And these are implemented in response to known problems where there's evidence of failure, and they prevent that issue from recurring. What's really important is when we develop corrective actions that we make them specific and measurable. We should be able to have evidence demonstrating that they've been implemented and understand the before and after a corrective action is done. Preventive actions should also be considered. There may not always be a preventive action coming out of a real issue, right? Preventive actions are about potential problems or risks of failure. And what we want to do here is to try to prevent them from occurring to begin with. When we're taking corrective action, we want to consider where the learnings from those corrective actions can be applied to other areas to prevent similar or future issues. The last thing we also want to consider are how we are going to verify effectiveness of this CAPA. Verifications of effectiveness verify that that issue or that action effectively prevents that issue from coming back. And we want to do this by gathering evidence such as data, trends, and feedback. We really want to think about how we're going to verify at this stage, even though we haven't implemented anything yet, because if we can't think of how we would verify it, our corrective action may not be specific enough. We may not be able to gather evidence to demonstrate that that CAPA has been completed and is effective if we can't think of what a verification would be at this stage. So it's really important to consider that now. As we develop our CAPA plans, something we want to consider is what's called the CAPA hierarchy, and this is from NSF. The different types of corrective actions that we take are more effective if we are working towards the top of this CAPA hierarchy. Elimination is the best type of corrective action to take, which is eliminating the possibility of the error. So for instance, going back to our sugar example, can we totally eliminate the need to have a probe in the bin to begin with? Maybe we don't even need it, so we don't have to worry about it getting dirty. Or replacement, replacing the process or equipment with something more reliable. Maybe we can put a level probe in the bin that won't get dirty with sugar, like a laser level that was on the top of the bin versus something that sits in the sugar itself. So replacing it. Facilitation, making that process easier to perform, reducing the likelihood of mistakes. Detection is improving our capability to detect a deviation before it occurs or as it occurs so that we can manage it. And mitigation, so minimizing the effects of deviations as they occur. And this can be done through sorting, rework, or other temporary solutions. Typically, when we're working at the bottom of this CAPA hierarchy, we're going to be talking about those immediate corrections, right? Controlling the symptoms. And as we develop corrective actions, really we want to try as hard as we can to work towards the top of this hierarchy, because those are going to be the solutions that are going to be the most effective at eliminating the root cause. Training alone is not sufficient to address root cause. In reality, turnover happens, people make errors. This is always a possibility. So if you're just relying on training as your corrective action, the issue is very likely to come back. We don't want to just blame and retrain at this stage. We want to understand what in the process allowed the error to occur and fix that part of the process. So training alone is just not good enough. Good practices for determining corrective actions. First is to ensure that those immediate corrections are implemented as soon as possible. We want to control that risk. We want to make sure that those symptoms are managed as we go through and understand root cause and develop actions. We want to make sure that we're completing the corrective actions in a timely manner, but we want to also make sure that as we're creating the plan, we're going to have realistic timeframes. In some cases, it may require investment or major process changes to implement the corrective action. That's okay. Make sure those timeframes are realistic, but aggressive and proportional to the severity of the issue. And again, we want to develop actions near the top of that CAPA hierarchy. Mistakes to avoid, corrections being considered corrective actions. We don't want to just control the symptoms of the issue. We want to get out of that firefighting mode and solve issues for good. Not using a root cause analysis tool, so jumping to conclusions. If we do this, it's very likely that the action we're going to take is not going to be effective. And again, corrective actions that rely only on training are not going to be effective long term. And we're going to jump into our next exercise here. And for this exercise, we're going to take a look at a few different CAPA plans and rate these plans based on a 3-point scale. All of the CAPA plans that you're seeing today are from real Mondelez supplier quality expectations audits. Some of them have been reworded to make the issues a little bit more easy to understand or a little more generic. But for the most part, these are real issues that we've seen with suppliers that we're looking at their CAPA plans. As you assess these CAPA plans, ask yourself for the root cause, is it clear? Was it fully analyzed? If you ask why again, does it add uncertainty? For the immediate correction, does it contain the symptoms of the problem? For the corrective and preventive actions, does it address the root cause? Will it prevent the issue from repeating? And is it specific and measurable? And for the verification of effectiveness, will it assess if the action has prevented the recurrence? I'll go ahead and open up the voting for the first one now. Oops. For finding number 1, this is in good manufacturing practices. The on-site inspection found employees' personal belongings are being stored in the storage area for packaging work tools and personal protective equipment. The root cause that the supplier provided was none. They didn't provide one. They also did not provide a correction. For the corrective action, they said they're going to strengthen staff training. And the verification of effectiveness, they did not provide one here also. So go ahead and open up Mentimeter and vote on what you think, how good of a CAPA plan is this, good, fair, or poor. We'll give everybody a few seconds to answer here. Doesn't look like we're getting any votes here. We have a technical issue. Lindsay, are you seeing votes come out on your end?
No, I'm not seeing any votes at the minute. The link is still in the Q&A. Maybe I can bump it up and then people can see it.
It looks like we have a technical issue with Menti. Bear with me a second. All right, now people should be able to vote. There we go.
Wow, wow, wow.
All right, we have about 50 votes in so far. Give it a few more seconds. I know that the question was stuck on the previous exercise.
Nó có mấy là câu hỏi đây? Nó có mấy là câu hỏi đây?
Okay, it looks like most people said poor here. We had a few fairs and a few goods. I would agree with this assessment. First and foremost, that CAPA plan is incomplete. We're missing the root cause, correction, and verification. We want to ask, what are they doing immediately to control the symptoms of the issue? The corrective action assumes that the root cause is a knowledge gap. But in this case, could it be a hygienic design issue? Maybe the employees don't have anywhere to store their personal belongings, and that's why they're storing it in the packaging area. We really want to make sure that we understand the root cause and don't just make assumptions and jump to a conclusion. The corrective action itself is not specific. It doesn't really explain what they will do to strengthen the training and how it will be done. So it's not specific and it's not measurable. Okay, good job with that first one. The next question or the next finding that we're going to assess is in extraneous matter. For this one, the company did not provide evidence of a glass and hard plastic program. The root cause was a lack of a specific procedure for managing glass and hard plastic. The correction is to create and inventory locations with glass and hard plastic. The corrective action is to create a new procedure for glass and hard plastic management. And the verification is to inspect for damaged glass and hard plastic in weekly GMP inspections, and in the audit management of new program during the annual internal audit. So they're going to audit that new program as they do their annual audit. Let's give everybody a few seconds to answer. Okay, we have a little over 60 responses so far. It seems like a pretty even split. Most people said good or fair. Few people said poor. So I would agree with the good here. It's somewhere between good and fair. First is that there's a clear connection between the root cause, correction, and corrective action. So that logic makes sense. The root cause itself, there may just be one why to root cause. So could they ask why again? Why do we lack a procedure? It'd be good to ask this question at this stage because there may be other programs that could benefit from asking that why again. And we may have a more systemic issue that we have not gotten to, and asking why may enable us to get to that level. But for the most part, the logic makes sense. And the correction and corrective action should close the gap and prevent it from recurring. So I would say overall that this is a pretty good CAPA plan. Great job, everybody. Thanks for completing the exercise. We'll have a few more exercises near the end of the session today, so please keep that Menti window open. So we've gotten through the determine corrective actions step of our CAPA process. The next step is to implement those actions. Once our plans are in place, it's time to implement. Some good practices as you implement your corrective actions. We want to try to capture the evidence of completion as we're doing the actions. What's especially valuable is to include before and after so that we can see the change in the process. Some mistakes to avoid: solutions not being updated in policies or procedures. We want to make sure that we document and capture the new ways of working. We also want to make sure that we're passing those ways of working on to anybody that's affected, so that even though Dave now may be cleaning that level probe in the sugar bin, if the operators on other lines or other shifts don't know how to do that, the issue is very likely to happen again. So we want to make sure that we're passing on that information to everybody. We may need to work towards the elimination of the issue. So don't just assume that the problem is solved. We were going to verify the next step to verify that it's effective, but it may take more than one cycle of analysis before the issue is successfully eradicated. So if we're seeing the issue still happening, you may have to go back and review that RCA. The great thing is that you have it done and you can just see if there's something you overlooked or continue to ask why until you get down to that underlying cause. The next step is to verify effectiveness. After we take that corrective action, it's critical that we verify that it's effective so that we know that it's preventing that recurrence. We don't just want to assume that. We want to, again, when we're creating the CAPA plan, we want to consider how we'll verify it, because that'll ensure that we have, the CAPA plan is, the CAPA is going to have enough evidence that we can do a verification, right? So we want to plan it back at that stage. As we perform the verification, we want to gather evidence so we can use data or trends to show the change in the process. We could use insights and feedback from people that operate the process or are affected by the process and understand if they've seen the issue recur. We could also use observation, right? We can go out to where the issue was occurring before and see if the issue is happening now. We can inspect. Those are just some options for verification. Good practices for verification are really to select periodic verifications that you can embed within existing processes. And this allows for continued control. These are better than one-off verifications that you'll just perform once, because they'll continue to happen over and over and over again and make sure that your issue doesn't come back. The next step is tracking. Poor tracking is really very often the reason that CAPA programs are ineffective. Just not having good visibility of where your CAPAs are in your process and what you're trying to manage. Effort spent on performing root cause analysis can really go to waste if you don't have good tracking of your corrective actions and whether or not they've been implemented. It takes a lot of time and effort to do this, right? To get to root cause and develop a plan. We don't want to let that effort go to waste. We want to make sure that we're tracking it and fixing those issues for good. You can do tracking in all sorts of different ways. There's CAPA platforms out there in the market that can help you manage your corrective action plans. You can also use Excel. Really, what's important is that you have a method that you're going to use that's going to work for you and manage that. Good practices here are to plan those reviews of the CAPA health at a set frequency. So no matter how you're managing it, having a plan of when you're going to do that review, including a review of the priorities, the status of your CAPAs, whether they're on time or overdue, and really, managing that process proactively. You could also utilize this tracking as the input into discussions for your management review. This is really where, if you're seeing issues with your CAPA process health, you can get support or more resources, and you can escalate issues with regards to CAPA in those management reviews. Mistakes to avoid here, first, is really failing to execute and track those effectiveness of solutions. And also incomplete documentation. This is very often an issue that actions aren't clear, or CAPA records are missing information, or you just can't find CAPAs for particular issues, particularly like severe issues, not having that in the system that you're using to track your CAPAs. The next thing that we want to do is do an analysis of the data sources that really feed our CAPA program. For the key data sources for your quality management system programs, you want to regularly analyze them for recurring issues that may require corrective action. If we look at hold and release, for example, if we see that we keep having holds for the same issue, when we look at that data, we may want to take a corrective action to address that. By looking at the data sources, we can also see if issues that we've previously taken corrective actions on, if those corrective actions continue to be effective, right? If we see that issue pop back up again when we look at our data source, well, maybe that corrective action wasn't effective, or maybe we have another issue there that we need to analyze. Mondelez requires our suppliers to evaluate the effectiveness of CAPAs for these key data sources: out of spec process or product, products deviating from CCP critical limits, customer and consumer feedback and complaints, failures to meet external regulatory or customer requirements, issues in internal audits, external audits, regulatory inspections, and Mondelez audits, product retrievals, and supplier performance measures. The last step here is management review. We want to review CAPA periodically with our management team. These reviews allow for good communication for the successful implementation of our CAPA program, and allows us to review that CAPA process health that we're getting from our tracking with the leadership on our site, looking at those trends. It also allows us to escalate those quality issues to the leadership to make sure that we have the right focus on those corrective actions and we're assigning the right resources to address them. And we also can share those insights from our data source analysis with that team. Very often in management reviews, we may also be triggering CAPAs. So that's a good place to capture new CAPAs as well. Management commitment is really the key for success of a CAPA program. Without management commitment at this stage, we're really just not going to be able to be successful. When we look at Mondelez SQE audits, these are the most frequent key drivers that we see with corrective and preventive action programs. One is that, as we go to re-audit the site, we see that findings from the previous Mondelez audit were just not addressed. We also see, after major issues, no evidence of root cause analysis or CAPA being taken, or that the root cause analysis for a major issue is just insufficient to getting to the root cause. In a lot of cases, we also see that the corrective actions taken are really only immediate corrections and are only controlling the symptoms of the issue. Not being able to show evidence or verification of effectiveness, CAPA records being incomplete or missing details of the actions that have been taken, ineffective tracking and missing CAPA records, systematic gaps in CAPA closure. So here it's, the majority of CAPAs being overdue or just not being addressed in a timely manner. The CAPA program not being effective at eliminating repeat issues, so the same issues coming back again and again. And the prioritization and the actions taken not reflecting the severity of the issue, so not having a proportional response to a major high-risk issue. So we've taken a look at all the CAPA steps. We've identified the issues. We've prioritized and analyzed root cause. We determined the corrective actions and implemented them. We've verified that they were effective. We implemented tracking for our CAPA program. We analyzed all of the data sources that feed the program, and we reviewed our CAPA process health with the management at our site. Next, we will talk about the expectations Mondelez has for CAPA programs. This is right from our Mondelez Supplier Quality Expectations Manual. The SQE requires that CAPA be taken for all of the programs that are mandated in that manual in the event of nonconformities. So the supplier needs to have an effective program to track those actions as well and address them in an appropriate and timely manner. Any findings that you have on a Mondelez audit require corrective action as well and require you to report back to Mondelez on the completion of those corrective actions on the agreed on time frame that's agreed during the audit. And after the closure of a Mondelez CAPA, You shall inform us when it's completed. For Mondelez quality notifications, these are Mondelez customer complaints. You also need to have a formalized process to get to root cause and implement corrective actions for quality notifications. We have three different levels of priority, three different levels of quality notifications. A priority one is a food safety risk, so these are the highest risk. Priority two are non-food safety risks, but these are impacts to quality or significant impact to process or product. And three really are no impacts to food safety, process, or product, but could be missing documentation, missing parameters, that sort of issue. For priority ones, we require you to acknowledge the issue within 1 to 2 business days. And in all cases, we require a preliminary investigation back with an immediate correction within 5 business days. And then the full root cause and corrective action plan needs to be developed and agreed on with Mondelez within a target of 10 business days for priority ones with a maximum of 30, a target of 20 for priority twos, and a maximum of 30 for priority threes. If you have a finding in a Mondelez SQE audit, we also require you to follow up on those and communicate back when they've been completed. Depending on the severity of the issue, the follow-up for the CAPA implementation may be a little bit different. This slide here, some of you may have seen it before. This is part of the opening and closing audit deck for a Mondelez SQE audit. So the follow-up may be different depending on the severity of the findings in the audit. After you have a finding in an audit, the follow-up process, you'll be contacted via email from the Mondelez CAPA lead that will be managing and monitoring the completion of your CAPAs. So they'll send you a request and you'll have to provide an update on the completion of all of your corrective actions in your plan via email. You'll also need to submit evidence for the completion of any disapproved, needs improvement, or needs refinement findings. The CAPA lead will then review that evidence and request clarification if needed. And then, depending on the severity of the issue, there may also be an on-site verification required prior to your next audit. But in most cases, the full verification of those CAPAs will be performed at the next scheduled audit. For quality notifications, you'll also be notified via email. These emails are going to come directly from the Mondelez manufacturing site that received the material that has the issue. And you must acknowledge those and investigate those within those timeframes that we said earlier. And you're going to work with the Mondelez site to agree on that corrective action plan and report directly to them on the completion of that plan. And with that, let's jump into a few more exercises. So again, we're going to rate these plans based on a 3-point scale. I'm going to say they're good, fair, or poor. So finding number 3. This finding was in pest management. Live cockroaches were observed on the floor of the processing area during the plant tour. In a review of the pest management program, there is currently no data indicating roach sightings or captures. It was explained that there's no log or process in which employees can report roach sightings. SQE section 6.8 requires a trend analysis for pest activity and a pest activity log where employees can report those sightings. The root cause here is cracks in the exterior wall of the building are allowing pest entry and harborage points. The correction they took was to clean and inspect the processing area where insects were seen, and to contact the pest control operator to perform a crack and crevice treatment of the area. The corrective and preventive action is to seal those cracks in the exterior wall, install additional bait stations, and perform a weekly cleaning around the exterior of the building. And The verification is to add the processing area to the weekly pest control inspection. All right, voting is open. I see the responses coming in. Take time to read the whole plan. Don't just vote what you see on the screen, what you see other people responding. Assess the plan and use your best judgment on how good of a plan this is. Right? Is it going to address the issue? Is it going to prevent it from happening again? I'll give everybody a few seconds to think. Okay, we have 37 responses so far. Give a few more seconds here. If you close the Mentimeter window, the link is still in the Q&A panel, and you can find the code, the QR code, up on the top of the screen if you need to reopen it. Okay. Looks like we're not getting any more responses here. So most people said good. Oh, it just jumped up. It looks like we froze a little bit. We'll give it another few seconds. Mentimeter's being a little temperamental this morning. We have 99 responses. Yeah, we have a little bit of a lag here. Okay. We have over 100 responses. So most people said good. We have a bunch of fair and a couple poor. This one's a tricky one. So the root cause, correction, and corrective action, they have a very clear connection for the infrastructure issue, right? Fixing those cracks in the exterior walls should prevent that pest entry. For the root cause, can they ask another why here? So why are there cracks in the exterior wall? Maybe they didn't get down to the root cause. Right? Why are those cracks happening? What allowed those cracks to occur? And is there a possibility that they're happening everywhere in the factory, maybe not just this area? So maybe there's an underlying issue that we didn't get to. The bigger issue here, though, is that the CAPA plan only addresses half of the finding. The CAPA plan fails to address the lack of a sighting log or trending for roaches. So it's really only addressing the infrastructure piece, not the data piece. So it's really important because this is like a two-part finding that the CAPA plan addresses the whole problem. The infrastructure was part of the issue, but the site failed to identify that was an issue because they don't have the log in place and they don't have they don't have data and trending to identify that roaches have become an issue. So it's really important that we make sure that when we do the RCA and develop the plan, we're considering the entirety of the problem. So part of this is overlooked. So this was a tricky one. Number 4, this one's in utilities management. There is no separator filter located upstream of the steam injection point to remove particles from the steam used to heat the product. Turbidity, aroma, and particulate matter of the steam condensate are not assessed. The root cause here is that the steam that is used comes from the condensation of the product, therefore was not considered necessary to filter or test it. The correction is to begin to evaluate the aroma, turbidity, and particulate matter in the steam. The CAPA is to evaluate the feasibility of purchasing a steam filter. And the verification is to review steam condensate testing quarterly. What do we think on this one? Getting some votes in now. We'll give everybody some time to think about this one. Okay, looks like we're getting votes in now, about 14 votes so far. Okay, we have about 30 votes. Everyone's taking a little bit longer on this one after the last one. That last one was tricky, right? Okay, we have a pretty even split so far between good, fair, and poor. We'll give it another few seconds. Okay, so pretty even split. Most people are saying fair with a good amount of goods and poors, so we're very split on this one. I would say that this one's fair, so I would agree with fair. There's some opportunities here to make this better. First, why could be asked again. Why didn't they know that it was necessary? So did they really get to the underlying issue here? So asking that why again would probably be beneficial. For the corrective action here, evaluating the feasibility doesn't fix the issue. Evaluating the feasibility really is a task and not a full corrective action. The steam is still a risk even after that feasibility study is completed. The feasibility study itself doesn't fix the issue. The issue is only fixed once they purchase and install that steam filter. So listing a step towards the corrective action as the corrective action really is not sufficient in this case. We want to list what the action will be that actually addresses the root cause and prevents the recurrence. That feasibility study really doesn't get us where we need to be. Right, great job on that one. Next finding. This one's in sanitary design. During an audit on site, they observed the packaging main entrance door was not fully closing, leaving a 2-centimeter opening to the exterior of the building. The root cause is that the door verification is not included in the preventive maintenance plan. The correction is to repair the door to eliminate the opening. The corrective action is to include the preventive maintenance plan, include in the preventive maintenance plan an inspection of the doors in critical areas of the process. And the verification is to verify this during monthly GMP walks. What do we think on this one? Right, we have about 15 responses so far. We'll give it a few more seconds. About 40 responses. Seems to be a pretty even split so far between good and fair. We have some poor. Okay, so most people are saying either good or fair. And I would say, I would agree. It's pretty good. It's a good plan. The logic for the root cause can be understood. The door has an opening. Why? Because they're not being inspected. Why? Because they're not included in the PM plan. That logic makes sense if we can understand how they got to the root cause. In this case, we may want to ask, is the PM plan really the cause, or is this a solution? Right? Maybe it's not the cause itself and just a way of addressing that cause. The correction, though, addresses that immediate threat and the corrective action should prevent the recurrence here. So overall, I would say that this is a pretty good plan. So I agree with your assessment. Yeah, somewhere between good and fair. And great job, everybody. I hope these exercises have been helpful in understanding how to analyze a CAPA plan. In review, our 3 takeaways for today were to understand the steps to an effective CAPA process, learn the best practices for executing CAPA, and recognize the differences between a good and poor CAPA plan. In the deck, I've included a whole bunch of resources for CAPA and RCA. We've done some more in-depth training on root cause analysis in the past. Those are available up on our Supplier Information Center. So I've linked those in the deck, so please look for those. I've also linked a bunch of other resources with regards to RCA and CAPA. These are non-monolith resources, but you can look at those resources to get more details on how to manage CAPA and how to perform root cause analysis. Thanks everybody for joining today's session. We're going to jump into question and answer in just a second. Up on the screen here, there is the QR code to our quiz and survey for today's session. This is a different QR code that we used earlier. Please be sure to complete this quiz and survey because it's our way of tracking attendance in today's session and is also our best way of getting feedback from you on today's training. We'll also be putting a link to the quiz and survey in the Q&A panel as well. Please be sure to complete that. And with that, we'll go over to Lindsay to see if we have any questions.
Yeah, so we've got a few questions. So we've got a couple of questions on verification of effectiveness. So the first one is about timing, I think. How long must we be doing effectiveness in tracking process? 1 month, 6 months, or 1 year?
Good question. It really is. The answer is I can't give a hard answer on this because it depends, right? It depends on what the issue was, how often you were seeing the issue, right? Was it a recurring issue? And what sort of corrective action you've taken. So you want to do the verification pretty soon after you've implemented corrective actions to make sure that those corrective actions were successful. But really it's going to depend on, what the issue was and how often it was occurring and what sort of frequency or how soon you need to perform the verification. Again, periodic verifications that you can embed within your existing processes are the best kind. Right. So once you've done that, if you implement it in a periodic, if you implement a periodic verification in an existing process, once you've seen that it's effective a few times, you can just say, you can consider that it's controlled. And you'll know because you're doing that regularly that if the issue comes back, it's going to be highlighted in that process. You could have confidence that the issue is not going to come back, or if it does, you're going to know about it right away. So the answer is it depends, and it's really going to be up to you to determine the best way of doing that. Good question.
So another question on effectiveness. Evidence of verification of effectiveness. Is it necessary to take photos / showing any document if we do the verification through observation?
Yeah, you really want to always try to capture that evidence because that's going to demonstrate that you did it, right? And that it's under control, especially for an audit finding, right? You want to have that physical evidence to demonstrate you've done the verification. You really want to try to capture that. So if it was observation, right? If it's something you're physically seeing, before and after photos are great. If you're doing it based on feedback, capture that feedback. Who did you talk to? When did you talk to them? What did they say? Right? Document that conversation, right? That's your evidence that you had that discussion and used feedback as your verification. So there's always some sort of evidence you can capture. It's really important that you capture it because that's demonstrating that your process is doing that step, that verification step. Good question.
The next question, who or what platform can we approach if we have further questions after this training?
The best way to reach out to us on, for any questions on CAPA is through our Mondelez supplier quality email. So the email that most of you received this training invite on is the one you can respond back to. You can ask us any questions on CAPA. Also in the deck, we have some resources, so links to other training on CAPA and root cause analysis. Those are some other good resources you can look at if you need some help in performing some of the actions that we talked about today or understanding how to go through root cause. But feel free to reach out to us on that supplier quality email.
Okay.
Other questions, Lindsay?
Yeah, we've got some more. So somebody's asking, can you share us the presentation slides, which I believe we will be doing after these training is completed?
Yeah, this is the third of 3 sessions, so you'll see an email within the next couple of days with the presentation. It'll take a little bit longer to get the recordings published on our site because there's a process for that, but the presentation you'll receive via email from that same Mondelez supplier quality address.
Next question on foreign matter. So when it comes to foreign matter, what are the ways we can identify foreign matter is coming from? When it comes FTIR test, it very much depends on the FTIR database / library. So I think that was a twofold question there.
Okay. I think that we're talking specifically about the one example, right, that we had earlier. When it comes to ways to identify foreign matters coming from.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, I mean, it's using those tools, right, to get down to the root cause. So having a methodology where you're asking, why the issue is occurring and drilling down into the data and trying to capture evidence. So it could be difficult in some cases, right, if it's a one-off foreign material issue, right? So this is where it's important to get that cross-functional team in place that has that different understanding, because you may have maintenance personnel that has an understanding of, the equipment, how that could be introducing foreign material into the process. Your buyer may have a good understanding of the material-related causes. So having that good cross-functional team for the root cause analysis really helps a lot to make sure that you're kind of going beyond that obvious, and that fishbone diagram, making sure that you're not overlooking any of those categories, and then really digging down into the underlying root cause using a tool like 5Y to get to that underlying issue. So, that would be my recommendation in that case. Foreign matter can be pretty difficult in some cases to diagnose, but having the right expertise on the team is really critical in getting to that underlying cause. So I hope I answered that question.
At one site I worked at, where we had foreign matter issues, we developed a foreign matter library of sorts where we took samples of various bits of machinery like seals and things like that and kept them in a folder, so that if we had pieces of foreign material that came through in a customer complaint or that our operators found on the line, that we could try and match it to our little library of foreign matter, which that really helped us actually. If you've got a big plant and huge amounts of machinery and huge amounts of things that can cause foreign matter, having that library really helped us.
Yeah, in my experience, we had something very similar. We had a box of all of the foreign material bindings that we had, and we had everything bagged with the date of the issue, as well as if it was a hold, the hold related to that, so that if we had foreign material, going back to compare and contrast was really helpful to understand, if it was a recurring issue, right? Have we seen this before, or have we seen something similar, and really narrow down, with that cross-functional team, what the potential sources are. So that, saving your foreign matter can really help with future investigations. So I really would recommend that. It's a great point, Lindsay.
I think we have one last question. Can a CAPA be inconclusive?
Yeah, certainly. The root cause analysis and the CAPA itself, it could be inconclusive. In some cases, you may not be able to figure out the root cause. You may just not have the evidence, right? If you're doing the root cause analysis too far gone from when the issue occurred, or you just don't have enough information to get to that root cause, in some cases, you may not know, right? You may just have to put
Em vừa
an
lấy, em vừa
immediate
lấy đi em.
correction in place to control the symptoms of the issue. You know, what's really important is to try to do the root cause analysis as soon as possible so that you're not losing the facts. People forget things. The status of equipment and processes change. So if you're looking at it 2 months later versus the day of, it's going to be much easier to complete it the day of than it is much later. So the sooner the better when it comes to root cause analysis and CAPA. As far as the CAPA itself being inconclusive, right, whether or not it's effective, when you're developing that CAPA plan, really making sure that you think about how you're going to verify it is important. And you want to make sure that it's specific and measurable. That can help with some of the clarity on whether or not it's effective by having a good, well-defined verification of effectiveness. And again, capturing that data and capturing that evidence. Capturing the evidence of the before as soon as the issue occurs is the best time. And that can help with being confident that the CAPA is effective later on because you have that before state captured. Good. Any other questions, Lindsay?
I think that's it, unless anybody wants to pipe up with one last question. That's all the questions we've got in the Q&A.
Great. I just want to remind everybody that up here on the screen, we have the QR code to our quiz and survey for today's session. Again, that's our way of tracking attendance, so please be sure to complete that. And it's also our best way of getting feedback from you. You could also find a link to the quiz and survey in the Q&A panel. I see that Lindsay's put that up for you as well. So please be sure to complete that before you leave today's session. And with that, we'll say thank you for everybody for joining. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for moderating today's session and handling the Q&A. I hope
Thank you very much for presenting, Chris.
Of course. Thank you. And everybody have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Phải chịu thời gian bao giờ? Hai không bốn mươi.